"You are not half the woman your sister is," my parents said at dinner. I pushed my chair back and said, "Then she can start paying your rent." Mom turned pale. "Rent? What rent?" "My name is Sarah, and this is the story of how I discovered that being the responsible daughter was just code for being the family ATM while my golden child sister lived her best life at everyone else's expense. Let me start from the beginning. I'm 32, work as a software engineer at a tech company in Austin, and have been financially independent since I graduated college at 22. My sister Madison, who's 28, is what my parents would call free-spirited and what I would call professionally unemployed. She spent the last decade bouncing between yoga instructor certifications, failed art ventures, and relationships with men who think cryptocurrency will make them millionaires. Growing up, the dynamic was always clear. Madison was the pretty one, the creative one, the one who could charm her way out of any situation with a smile and a few tears. I was the practical one, the responsible one, the one who got good grades and never caused any drama. While Madison was getting into fights at school and coming home with hickeys at 15, I was tutoring other kids and saving money from my part-time job at the local grocery store. Our parents, Linda and Robert, owned a small accounting firm that did well enough to keep us comfortable, but they always made it clear that money didn't grow on trees. Well, apparently that rule only applied to one of us. The pattern started in college. Madison went to an expensive private art school on the East Coast while I got a full scholarship to UT Austin and worked 2 part-time jobs to cover my living expenses. When Madison decided halfway through her junior year that she wanted to switch majors from fine arts to photography, requiring an extra year and additional equipment costs, guess who my parents called for help? Not to ask for money directly, of course. It was always framed as a family investment or helping out during a temporary rough patch. By the time I graduated and landed my first real job, I was already sending $500 a month home to help with what my dad called unexpected expenses. When I got promoted and my salary jumped significantly, that monthly contribution somehow doubled. When I bought my condo 2 years ago, suddenly there were more emergencies that required my assistance. Madison, meanwhile, graduated with a degree in photography and immediately moved back home. She's been there ever since, contributing nothing to the household while pursuing various artistic endeavors that never seemed to generate any income. She did have a brief stint working at a local coffee shop, but quit after 3 weeks because her manager was stifling her creative energy. I should mention that I've been in a relationship with my boyfriend Jake for 4 years. He's a high school teacher, makes decent money, and we've been talking about getting engaged. The plan was to have a small wedding next year and maybe start thinking about kids in a few years. Jake has seen firsthand how much I send home every month, and while he's never said anything directly, I can tell it bothers him that my parents seem to view me as their personal bank account. The breaking point came 3 weeks ago at our monthly family dinner. These dinners are a tradition my mom insisted on maintaining, even though they usually end with me feeling frustrated and Madison acting like she's doing us all a favor by showing up. This particular Sunday, I'd had a rough week at work, dealing with a major project deadline and some office politics that had me stressed out. I arrived at my parents' house around 6, and Madison was already there, lounging in the living room wearing what looked like a brand new outfit. She had fresh highlights in her hair and was scrolling through her phone, probably updating her Instagram with more photos of whatever artisanal coffee she discovered that week. "Oh good, Sarah's here," Mom called from the kitchen. Madison was just telling us about her exciting new project. I sat down next to Madison on the couch, trying to summon some enthusiasm. "What's the project?" Madison's eyes lit up the way they always did when she had a new scheme. "I'm starting a lifestyle blog. It's going to focus on sustainable living and mindful consumption. I've already got some great content ideas, and I think it could really take off." "That sounds great," I said, though I was internally rolling my eyes. This was probably the 5th business venture Madison had announced in the past 2 years. There was the Etsy shop selling handmade jewelry that lasted 3 weeks, the attempt to become a social media influencer that fizzled after she gained 12 followers, and the brief period where she was convinced she was going to become a professional dog walker. "The thing is," Madison continued, "I need to invest in some equipment. A good camera, lighting setup, maybe a better laptop. And I'll need to redesign the website I started." I could see where this was heading. "How much are we talking about?" "Well, if I'm going to do this right, probably around $5,000 to get started. But I really think this could be my breakthrough, you know?" Dad jumped in before I could respond. "We think it's a great opportunity for Madison to really establish herself. She's got such a good eye for these things. We were hoping," Mom added carefully, "that maybe you could help her get started. As an investment in her future." I felt that familiar knot forming in my stomach. I just helped with the car repair last month. And I'm still sending the monthly payment for the house expenses. "We know, sweetie, and we appreciate everything you do," Mom said. "But this could really be Madison's chance to become financially independent." Madison nodded enthusiastically. "Exactly. Once the blog takes off, I won't need help anymore. This is just seed money. I looked at my sister, sitting there with her designer coffee cup and her new clothes, talking about becoming financially independent while living rent-free in our parents' house and asking me to fund her latest hobby. Something inside me snapped, but I managed to keep my voice level. Let me think about it, I said. Dinner was tense. Dad kept making comments about how proud he was of Madison for having such entrepreneurial spirit, while Mom talked about how creative and talented she was. I mostly pushed my food around my plate and tried to think about anything else. Then Madison made a comment that really got under my skin. You know, Sarah, you're so lucky that you found a career that suits you so well. I just can't imagine being stuck behind a desk all day writing code. It would crush my soul. Some of us have to do soul-crushing work to pay the bills, I replied, probably a bit more sharply than necessary. Madison looked hurt. I didn't mean it like that. I just meant that you're so practical and logical. It's perfect for you. Right. Practical and logical. I could feel my irritation building. Dad decided this was a good time to chime in. Madison's right, you know. You've always been the sensible one. It's wonderful how you've built such a stable life for yourself. Stable and boring, Madison added with a laugh. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. Mom laughed too. Oh, Madison, you're terrible. But you know what I mean, Sarah. You've always been so responsible and reliable. Madison has that creative spark that you just can't teach. That's true, Dad agreed. Madison has something special. She just needs the right opportunity to let it shine. I was starting to feel like I was watching a tennis match, with compliments for Madison flying back and forth while I sat there being described like a piece of reliable office furniture. The blog really could be amazing, Mom continued. Madison showed us her mood boards and the whole concept. She has such an eye for aesthetics. And she's so good with social media, Dad added. She knows how to connect with people in a way that's just natural. Madison was beaming under all this praise. I really think this could be it, you know? My chance to build something meaningful. We're so proud of her for pursuing her dreams, Mom said. It takes real courage to put yourself out there creatively, Dad agreed. I realized they weren't even talking to me anymore. They were having a conversation about how wonderful Madison was, and I just happened to be sitting at the table. This wasn't unusual, but for some reason, tonight it was bothering me more than usual. Of course, not everyone can be an entrepreneur, Madison said, looking at me with what I'm sure she thought was a sympathetic expression. It takes a certain kind of person to take those risks. That's when Dad delivered the line that changed everything. You know what, Madison's absolutely right. Sarah, you're a good person and you work hard, but you're not half the woman your sister is. Madison has that special something that just draws people to her. The room went dead silent. Mom looked shocked that Dad had said it out loud, but she didn't contradict him. Madison looked pleased but tried to hide it by saying, Daddy, that's not fair to Sarah. But the damage was done. All those years of being the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who solved everyone's problems with her wallet, and this is what they really thought of me. I wasn't half the woman Madison was. I pushed my chair back from the table and stood up. Everyone looked at me in surprise. You know what, Dad? You're absolutely right. I'm not half the woman Madison is. So from now on, she can start paying your rent. The color drained from Mom's face immediately. Rent? What rent? And that's when I realized they had no idea that I knew. See, here's the thing about being a software engineer, I'm really good with numbers and patterns. About a year ago, I started getting curious about exactly where all my monthly contributions were going. My parents owned their house free and clear, or so I thought. The unexpected expenses seemed to be happening pretty regularly. So I did a little digging. It turns out that 3 years ago, my parents took out a significant second mortgage on their house. I'm not entirely sure what they needed the money for initially, but I suspect it had something to do with covering Madison's college expenses and some business investments that didn't pan out. The monthly payment on that second mortgage was almost exactly what I was sending them every month. But here's the kicker, about 18 months ago, they refinanced again and took out even more money. I found this out because I have a friend who works at the bank they use, and while he couldn't give me details, he could confirm that they had significant monthly obligations on the property. I started paying more attention to their spending habits during our family dinners. Dad's new truck that he bought used but was clearly only a year old. The kitchen renovation they did last spring that they claimed was mostly DIY. The fact that Madison always seemed to have new clothes and never seemed to stress about money despite not having a job. So when Mom asked what rent? With that shocked expression, I knew I had them. The rent on the second mortgage you took out 3 years ago, I said calmly. The one I've been paying for you at $650 a month. And the additional mortgage payment from the refinance last year that bumped my monthly contribution up to $1,200. Dad's face went white. Madison looked confused. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that I've been paying the mortgage on this house for the past 3 years while you've been living here rent-free, playing artist and entrepreneur with my money. Mom was scrambling. Sarah, sweetie, you don't understand. We never meant for it to be permanent. We've been trying to get back on our feet. By taking out more loans and asking me for more money every month? The business had some tough years, Dad said defensively. We had to make some hard choices. Like choosing to let me subsidize Madison's lifestyle instead of expecting her to get a job? Madison finally seemed to understand what was happening. Wait, you've been paying for the house? Mom, Dad, is that true? The silence was deafening. And all those emergencies, I continued. The car repairs, the medical bills, the home maintenance. How much of that was actually emergencies and how much was just regular expenses you couldn't afford because you're over-leveraged on this house? Mom started crying. Sarah, we never wanted to burden you. We thought things would get better. You thought Madison would eventually contribute something? She's trying, Dad said. This blog could really work out. Like the jewelry business worked out? Like the dog walking worked out? Like the 5 other things she's tried and quit? Madison was getting defensive now. I didn't know about any of this. You can't blame me for their financial decisions. I can blame you for living here for free for 4 years while I pay your share of the expenses. I can blame you for asking me to fund your hobbies while contributing nothing to the household. They're not hobbies, they're career attempts. Career attempts that have generated exactly $0 in income. That's not fair. Creative work takes time to develop. 4 years, Madison. You've had 4 years to develop something, anything, that brings in enough money to buy your own coffee, let alone pay rent. The argument that followed was ugly. Madison accused me of being jealous of her creativity and freedom. Dad said I was being ungrateful and that family was supposed to support each other. Mom kept crying and saying she never meant for things to get so complicated. But the more they talked, the clearer it became that they had all just assumed I would keep paying indefinitely. There was no plan for Madison to become independent. There was no timeline for my parents to get their finances in order. They had just settled into a comfortable arrangement where I funded their lifestyle and they praised Madison for being special. I left that night without agreeing to fund the blog, and I went home and had a long conversation with Jake about everything I'd learned. He was incredibly supportive but also frustrated that I've been dealing with this alone for so long. You know this isn't normal, right? He said. Parents aren't supposed to rely on their adult children to pay their mortgage while supporting another adult child who won't work. The next morning, I sent my parents an email laying out exactly how much money I'd given them over the past several years. The total was staggering, over $40,000. I told them that I wouldn't be sending any more monthly payments, and that they had 90 days to figure out their financial situation. I also told them that if Madison wanted to continue living there rent-free while pursuing her creative dreams, that was their choice, but it wouldn't be subsidized by me anymore. The response was swift and dramatic. My phone started ringing within an hour of sending the email. First Mom, crying and begging me to reconsider. Then Dad, angry and accusing me of abandoning the family. Then Madison, who had apparently just learned the full extent of how much I'd been contributing. Madison's call was the most interesting. She was upset, but not entirely at me. Why didn't anyone tell me you were paying for everything? She asked. I feel terrible. Do you feel terrible enough to get a job? I asked. There was a long pause. It's not that simple, Sarah. I can't just abandon everything I've been working toward. What have you been working toward, exactly? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been working toward avoiding responsibility while I pay for the privilege. That call ended with Madison hanging up on me. The next few weeks were intense. My parents tried every approach they could think of. Guilt, how can you abandon family? Anger, after everything we've done for you, bargaining, what if we pay you back a little each month? And manipulation, Madison is having panic attacks because of the stress you've caused. But I held firm. I'd spent 10 years being the family ATM, and I was done. The real drama started when my parents realized I was serious. They had 90 days to figure out how to make their mortgage payments without my help, and Madison would need to start contributing or find somewhere else to live. Dad's first solution was to ask me to co-sign for another loan so they could refinance again and lower their monthly payments. I said no. Mom suggested maybe I could just help out for a few more months while Madison got her blog started. I said no. Madison proposed that maybe I could continue paying the mortgage but she would pay me back once her creative career took off. I said absolutely not. Around week 6 of the 90-day countdown, something interesting happened. Madison got a job. Not a career, not a creative endeavor, but an actual job working as a server at a popular restaurant downtown. Apparently, when faced with the possibility of having to move out of the family home, she discovered that she was capable of earning money after all. It's just temporary, she told me during a very awkward family dinner that I only attended because Mom literally begged me to come. Just until I can get the blog monetized. That's great, I said. How much are you contributing to the household expenses? Madison looked uncomfortable. Well, I'm still getting used to the schedule, and the tips vary a lot. Mom and Dad said I should focus on getting established at work first. I looked at my parents. So she's still not paying rent? She just started. Mom protested. Give her time to adjust. She's had 4 years to adjust to the idea that adults pay for their own housing. Dad jumped in. Sarah, you're being unreasonable. Madison is trying. This is progress. Progress would be Madison paying market rate rent for her room and contributing to utilities and groceries like any other adult roommate would. But she's our daughter, not a roommate, Mom said. And I'm your daughter too, but that didn't stop you from charging me $1,200 a month to subsidize her lifestyle. The dinner ended early, as they all did now. By week 10, my parents were panicking. They'd spoken to their bank about refinancing options, but their debt-to-income ratio was too high to qualify for better terms. Dad had picked up some freelance bookkeeping work, but it wasn't nearly enough. Mom was looking into part-time jobs for the first time in 20 years. Madison was working full-time at the restaurant now and actually seemed to be good at it. She'd been promoted to a better section and was making decent money in tips. But she was also exhausted and stressed in a way I'd never seen her before. I don't understand how you do it, she said to me during one of our rare phone conversations. Working every day, dealing with difficult people, never having time for anything you actually want to do. Welcome to adulthood, I replied. Most people figure this out at 18, but better late than never. But what about my dreams? What about my creativity? I'm too tired after work to even think about the blog. Madison, you've had 4 years to make something work creatively while I paid your bills. If you couldn't make it happen then, when you had unlimited time and no financial pressure, what makes you think you would have figured it out eventually? She didn't have an answer for that. The 90 days were up on a Tuesday. I knew because Mom called me that morning, crying, to ask if I would reconsider. They'd managed to scrape together enough to make the mortgage payment for 1 more month, but they couldn't sustain it. We might have to sell the house, she said. That might be the best option, I replied. But this is our family home. Madison grew up here. Madison is 28, Mom. She can grow up somewhere else. 2 days later, Dad called with a different approach. What if we sold the house and bought something smaller? Would you consider helping us with a down payment? No, Dad. I'm not investing any more money in your financial decisions. But we're family. Family doesn't mean I'm obligated to fund your poor financial planning indefinitely. What I didn't tell my parents during these conversations was how much their situation was affecting other areas of my life. Jake and I had been looking forward to planning our engagement and future together, but the family drama was creating stress in our relationship in ways I hadn't anticipated. I support what you're doing, Jake told me one evening after I'd spent an hour on the phone with my crying mother. But I'm worried about how much this is consuming your life. You're stressed all the time, you're losing sleep, and you're constantly checking your phone to see if they're calling again. He was right. Even though I'd cut off the financial support, I was still emotionally invested in the outcome in a way that wasn't healthy. I'd found myself driving by their house to see if the for sale sign had gone up yet. I was checking Madison's social media obsessively to see if she was posting about looking for apartments or complaining about her job. I was even asking mutual friends if they'd heard anything about how my family was coping. I think you need to set some boundaries about communication too, Jake suggested. Maybe tell them you'll only take calls about this situation once a week, on a specific day and time. That was actually brilliant advice. I sent my parents an email explaining that while I cared about their situation, the constant phone calls and guilt trips weren't helping anyone. I told them I'd be available to talk every Sunday evening for 1 hour if they wanted to update me on their progress, but that I wouldn't be taking crisis calls about their financial situation multiple times per day. The response to this boundary was predictably dramatic. Dad accused me of being cold and uncaring. Mom said she couldn't believe I was putting limits on when she could talk to her own daughter. Madison, surprisingly, was the most understanding. I get it, she said when she called me the next day. I know I've been part of the problem, and I know this whole situation is stressful for you too. You shouldn't have to be everyone's therapist on top of everything else. That conversation with Madison gave me hope that maybe she really was starting to understand the bigger picture. She'd been working at the restaurant for about 2 months at that point, and I could hear a difference in her voice. She sounded tired, but also more grounded than I'd heard her in years. Can I ask you something? She said. Were you angry at me all those years? Like, really angry? I thought about how to answer that honestly. Not angry, exactly. More like frustrated and resentful. I felt like I was working hard to build a life for myself, but I couldn't really enjoy it because I was always worried about everyone else's problems. I never thought about it that way. I guess I always assumed you were happy to help because you never said anything. I didn't say anything because I thought that's what family was supposed to do. But I was starting to feel like I was being taken advantage of. You were being taken advantage of. I can see that now. We talked for over an hour that night, which was probably the longest conversation Madison and I had had in years that didn't involve her asking me for something. She told me about her job, how physically exhausting it was but also how satisfying it felt to earn her own money. She talked about her coworkers and how they'd been teaching her about budgeting and finding affordable places to live. There's this girl Jessica who works with me, Madison said. She's been on her own since she was 18, and she knows all these tricks for saving money that I never even thought about. Like, did you know you can negotiate your cell phone bill? Or that buying generic brands can save you like 30% on groceries? I had to bite my tongue to keep from saying that yes, most adults knew these things. Instead, I just said, it sounds like you're learning a lot. I am. And I'm kind of embarrassed that I'm 28 and just figuring out stuff that Jessica knew at 18. But better late than never, right? Definitely better late than never. Meanwhile, my parents were struggling more than they'd let on initially. It turned out that their financial problems went deeper than just the mortgage payments. Dad's accounting business had been losing clients steadily over the past few years, partly due to competition from larger firms and partly because he'd been complacent about updating his technology and marketing approaches. Mom hadn't worked outside the home in over 20 years, and her job search was proving more difficult than expected. The part-time positions she was qualified for didn't pay much, and full-time positions either required skills she didn't have or experience she couldn't demonstrate. During one of our scheduled Sunday calls, Dad admitted something that shocked me. Sarah, I need to tell you something. The second mortgage we took out 3 years ago? It wasn't just for business expenses like we told you. A lot of that money went to Madison's credit card debt. What credit card debt? She'd run up about $15,000 on various cards during her first year back home. Shopping, restaurants, that photography equipment she never used. We didn't want her to declare bankruptcy or ruin her credit, so we paid it off for her. I was stunned. Does Madison know you used mortgage money to pay her debt? We never told her where the money came from. We just told her we were taking care of it. So not only had I been paying the mortgage that was partially used to cover Madison's irresponsible spending, but Madison didn't even know that her debt had created part of the financial burden that led to me supporting the family for years. Dad, this is exactly the kind of thing I'm talking about. You enabled Madison's bad financial decisions by shielding her from the consequences, and then you enabled them further by asking me to pay for it without telling me what the money was really for. We were trying to protect both of you girls. You weren't protecting us. You were protecting yourselves from having to have difficult conversations. And you were setting Madison up to never learn how to handle money responsibly. That conversation led to what was probably the most honest discussion our family had ever had. I insisted that Madison be included in the call, and I told her about the credit card debt and how it had contributed to the family's financial problems. Madison was mortified. I had no idea. I thought you guys just paid that off because you had extra money at the time. Where did you think extra money would come from? I asked. I don't know. I didn't really think about it. I was just so relieved that the debt was gone. Madison, that's exactly the problem. You didn't think about where the money came from because you didn't have to face the consequences of your spending. We spent 3 hours on that call, going through the entire timeline of financial decisions and how they'd affected everyone. By the end of it, I think we all had a clearer picture of how we'd gotten into this mess. Dad acknowledged that he'd been making financial decisions based on what was easiest in the short term rather than what was sustainable long term. Mom admitted that she'd been avoiding dealing with money issues because they made her anxious, so she just deferred to Dad's judgment even when she had concerns. Madison realized that her avoidance of financial responsibility had put pressure on everyone else in the family. I think I need to pay you back for the credit card debt too, Madison said. I mean, I know you didn't pay it directly, but if that's part of why you ended up supporting Mom and Dad, then I owe you that money. Madison, that would take you years to pay back on a server's salary. Then it takes me years. I should have been paying it back all along instead of letting you subsidize my mistakes without even knowing it. That was a turning point for Madison. She started tracking not just her current expenses, but also calculating how much she owed for the years of support she'd received. She created a spreadsheet that showed her rent, utilities, food, and other expenses that she should have been paying, and came up with a total that was frankly staggering. I owe you guys over $60,000, she announced during our next family call. Sarah, you directly, and Mom and Dad for letting me live here and eat your food and use your utilities for 4 years. Madison, we don't expect you to pay us back for basic living expenses, Mom said. But that's not how the real world works, Madison replied. If I'd been living anywhere else, I would have been paying for those things. Just because you're my parents doesn't mean you should have had to support an adult for 4 years. I was impressed by Madison's newfound understanding of financial responsibility, but I was also concerned about her setting up an unrealistic repayment plan that would stress her out and potentially cause her to give up. Madison, I think it's great that you're taking responsibility, but don't make this so overwhelming that you can't sustain it. Focus on being independent going forward rather than trying to pay back everything from the past. But I want to contribute something? Even if it's just a small amount each month toward what I owe you. We eventually worked out a plan where Madison would pay me $50 a month toward the money I'd spent supporting the family. It was a token amount that wouldn't strain her budget, but it was symbolically important to her to be contributing something. The interesting thing was that once Madison started thinking about money in terms of what things actually cost, she became incredibly resourceful. She started picking up extra shifts at the restaurant, found a weekend side job doing social media for a local boutique, and even started selling some of her old photography equipment that she'd never really used. "I can't believe how much money I wasted over the years," she told me. "I have thousands of dollars worth of art supplies and camera equipment that I used maybe once and then forgot about. What are you going to do with the money from selling it?" "First, I'm going to build up an emergency fund so I never have to ask anyone for help with unexpected expenses. Then I want to save up to move into my own place instead of living with roommates. And eventually, I want to start making larger payments toward what I owe you." This was a completely different Madison than the one who'd asked me to fund her lifestyle blog just a few months earlier. She was thinking long-term, planning ahead, and taking pride in her financial independence. The turning point came in week 14. My parents had decided to put the house on the market rather than try to keep up with the mortgage payments. It was a good market, and they were confident they could get enough to pay off both mortgages and have something left over for a smaller place. Madison, faced with the reality that her childhood home was being sold and she'd need to find her own place to live, had finally done the math on her restaurant income and realized she could actually afford a small apartment if she was careful with her money. But here's the thing that really surprised me: she was actually good at managing money once she had to. Within a month of taking full responsibility for her own finances, Madison had created a budget, found a roommate situation she could afford, and was even putting a little money aside each month. "I never realized how much things actually cost," she told me. "Like, I knew rent was expensive in theory, but I didn't really understand what that meant until I had to pay it myself." The house sold after about 4 months on the market, and my parents found a nice 2-bedroom condo that was well within their budget. Dad had been building up his freelance accounting practice and was earning steady income again. Mom had gotten a part-time job at a local nonprofit and was actually enjoying it. Madison had moved into a 3-bedroom apartment with 2 other women her age and was splitting all the bills 3 ways. She was still working at the restaurant and had gotten another promotion. She'd also started the blog, but as a genuine hobby this time rather than a get-rich-quick scheme. As for me, I was finally able to start saving money for my own future instead of funding everyone else's present. Jake and I got engaged 6 months after the big dinner blow-up, and we're planning a small wedding for next spring. We've also started looking at houses, which is something I never thought I'd be able to afford while supporting my extended family. The family dynamics have changed completely. Our monthly dinners are actually pleasant now because everyone is taking care of their own responsibilities. Madison and I have developed a much better relationship now that there's no financial resentment between us. My parents still sometimes make comments about how much they miss having Madison around the house, but they've also admitted that pushing her to become independent was probably long overdue. The most surprising part of this whole situation is that Madison is actually happier now. She's tired from working, but she's also proud of herself in a way she never was before. She has her own space, her own money, and her own sense of accomplishment. "I didn't realize how much it was affecting my self-esteem to be dependent on everyone else," she told me recently. "I mean, I know I complained about the pressure, but deep down I think I knew I wasn't really contributing anything." We were having coffee together, something we'd started doing every few weeks. It was nice to have a relationship with her that wasn't based on me paying for everything. "I'm sorry it took me so long to figure this out," she continued. "And I'm really sorry that you had to be the one to support everything for so many years. That wasn't fair." It was the first real apology I'd gotten from anyone in the family, and it meant a lot. "I'm proud of you for figuring it out," I told her. "And I'm glad we can have a normal sister relationship now." "Me too. Although I have to admit, I kind of miss being able to buy whatever I wanted without thinking about it." "Yeah, but did you actually want most of that stuff, or did you just buy it because you could?" Madison thought about that. "You know, I think a lot of it was just because I could. It's weird how much more I appreciate things now that I have to budget for them." 6 months later, our family feels completely different. My parents are financially stable for the first time in years. Madison is supporting herself and actually seems to enjoy the challenge. I'm building my own life with Jake without the constant drain of supporting everyone else. The blog, incidentally, never made any money. But Madison doesn't care because she's not depending on it to pay her bills. She writes about her experiences learning to live independently, and while she only has a few hundred followers, she genuinely enjoys it. During our most recent family dinner, Dad brought up the infamous night when everything changed. "You know, Sarah, I owe you an apology for what I said. About you not being half the woman Madison is. I remember, I said. I was wrong. Not just about the comparison, but about the whole situation. We put too much pressure on you to take care of everyone else, and we didn't give Madison the chance to prove what she was capable of. Mom nodded. We thought we were helping everyone, but we were actually hurting all of us. Madison jumped in. I want to apologize too. Not just for the money stuff, but for all the times I made you feel like your work wasn't important or creative enough. I had no idea what it actually took to earn the money I was spending. Water under the bridge, I said. Besides, look how everything turned out. And that's the truth. What started as the most painful family dinner of my life ended up being the catalyst for all of us to become better, more independent people. Madison discovered she was capable of more than she thought. My parents learned to live within their means and found new sources of income and purpose. And I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family is to stop enabling them. Jake often says that the best thing that came out of the whole situation was that we all learned to have healthier boundaries. He's right. For the first time in my adult life, I feel like I have a family where everyone contributes instead of just me. The final twist in this story happened just last month. Madison came to me with a business proposition. She'd been working at the restaurant for over a year and had gotten to know the owners pretty well. They were looking to expand and open a second location, and they'd offered her the chance to manage it for a percentage of the profits. The thing is, she said, I need some startup capital to buy into the partnership. About $10,000. I almost laughed. Madison, are you seriously asking me to invest in another one of your business ventures? I know how it sounds, she said quickly. But this is different. I've been working in the industry, I know the business model works, I have a track record with these owners. And I'm not asking for a gift, I want to borrow the money and pay you back with interest. I was skeptical, but she'd put together an actual business plan with financial projections and everything. She'd also saved up $5,000 of her own money to contribute. Jake and I talked about it extensively. On one hand, the old dynamic of me funding Madison's dreams had been so toxic that I was hesitant to get involved in any of her financial ventures. On the other hand, this wasn't the same person who'd asked me to fund her lifestyle blog 18 months ago. In the end, we decided to treat it like any other investment opportunity. I looked at her business plan, talked to the restaurant owners myself, and checked out their financials. It was actually a solid opportunity. So I loaned her the money with a formal contract, reasonable interest rate, and clear repayment terms. If it works out, great. If it doesn't, she's responsible for paying me back regardless, and she knows that. But here's the thing, I'm not worried about it the way I would have been before. Madison has proven over the past year and a half that she can handle financial responsibility. If the restaurant venture doesn't work out, I know she'll find another way to pay me back because she's not the same person who used to quit jobs after 3 weeks. The best part of this whole experience is that I finally have the family I always wanted, one where everyone contributes, everyone takes care of themselves, and no one takes advantage of anyone else. It took a dramatic confrontation and some painful months of adjustment, but we got there in the end. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I'd never spoken up that night at dinner. I'd probably still be sending $1,200 a month to my parents, Madison would probably still be living at home talking about her next big creative breakthrough, and I'd be getting more and more resentful while everyone else stayed comfortable. Instead, we all grew up a little bit, and our family is stronger for it. And whenever someone compliments Madison on her work ethic or her independence now, she always makes sure to give me credit for pushing her to find out what she was really capable of. That's worth more than any amount of money I ever sent home.